All right, so what we have here is my red slide. I had no idea that red was not a color. But in this case, it has no context, and absent context, it has no meaning, or at best, arbitrary meaning. Of course, it's not just plain old red. It is a little pixelated, a little variegated, so perhaps something else is going on here, which in fact it is. This red is in a flag, in this case the Mexican flag. Did you know there are about 196 countries in the world and only 53 don't have red in their flag? So it's a well-used color. This flag is part of a program, a Mexican program called Banderas Monumentales, which I think in Mexican means big-ass flags, because it's really big. And this is not on a pole outside of your local Mexican restaurant, but flying from a 50-meter pole over the Zócalo, the central public space of Mexico City. The plaza itself measures 240 meters square, and as such is one of the largest city squares in the world. But when you zoom out to the scale of Mexico City itself, the Zócalo is only one space in an extraordinarily large, nearly overwhelming conurbation. The metro area is just over 3,000 square miles. Rhode Island is only 1,214 square miles. And the metro population exceeds 20 million. I entitled this little presentation something sort of architectural and pretentious, like context, scale, meaning, and place. Really intellectual. But what I really have is a parlor trick that serves as a great excuse to take you to some of my favorite places. You know, the Japanese landscape painters have mastered this visual drama in fantastic landscapes by almost always placing human-scaled elements in the foreground to demonstrate just how majestic and overwhelming the natural world can be. Man's inconsequential presence is contrasted to the divine grandeur of mountains and sea and sky, and his dwelling actually seems somewhat precarious and temporal. Of course, this trick is not uncommon to Hollywood directors who conceal and only gradually reveal the scale of a setting as the camera zooms out and pans, like it does in this classic opening scene from The Sound of Music. We see a youthful Julie Andrews beginning to tell us that the hills are alive, news that's always been somewhat frightening to me, when the invisible helicopter carrying the camera begins to rise, and soon we are marvelously engulfed by the whole height and breadth of the Austrian Alps in all of their breathtaking glory. Why am I not surprised to learn that there's a website where you can go and learn, identify places where films have been shot all over the world, www.movielocations.com. Well, the average sedan, like the one in this image, weighs about 4,000 pounds. 1 cubic foot of granite weighs 168 pounds, about what I weigh. It would only take 22 cubic feet of granite to balance this car, about the volume of one of the small boulders in front of it in this image, keeping it from plunging into this ravine. But of course the ravine is of almost unimaginable proportions. This is Kings Canyon, one of our more dramatic, though less traveled national parks. The highway clings to the cliff face, descending over 2,000 feet from the valley rim to the level of the South Fork Kings River. Surmounted by Wren Peak, the full view of this turn in the canyon reduces our automobile to a dust speck in the scene. The drive down was one of the most amazing white-knuckled drives I have ever experienced into a wilderness that genuinely you feel is ready to consume you. If you're afraid of heights, you may want to avert your eyes. The remarkably small figures you see on the top of this rock, I hope you can see, are standing above an impossibly huge stone cliff. I can't say that I'd be comfortable standing even above the height of the leading edge of this outcropping, which is probably 40 or 50 feet high. But we've only just begun to measure the enormity of this piece of stone. You can arrange to hike up the back side of this cliff along a relatively gentle rise across a smooth, open rock face a half-mile wide with nothing to hang on but a couple strands of steel cable. It's an 8.5-mile hike up from the valley floor with over 4,800 feet of vertical gain. Those of you familiar with your national parks will recognize this as Half Dome in Yosemite. It's one of the most prominent granite features in the park, and the majesty of its form is only amplified by the 1,300-foot sheer vertical face of its west side, which is a little taller than the Empire State Building. It will make you hyperventilate. Such contrast in scale, perhaps a little less dramatic, can be seen in our own built environment if we care to frame a couple interesting points of reference, and then look at them from some unusual vantage points. You'll recognize Seattle's Space Needle, 600 feet high, and one of the tallest structures in the city. The view from Lake Union in Seattle is expansive. The 580-acre lake casts the needle into a broad environment in which it is just one of many remarkable features. Lake Union, I might add, is the setting for the houseboat scene in Sleepless in Seattle, another movie setting for you. This might be the least inspiring image in our show. Those of you from Richmond will recognize this as the Commonwealth of Virginia's Monroe Tower. It was meant to have a twin on that huge platform. Fortunately not built, perhaps, but built in 1981. It's 29 stories high, and at 449 feet, it is the largest, tallest building in Richmond. But in some places, maybe not. I remember the first time I saw an aerial photo of Manhattan, with tall buildings one after the other as far as the eye could see surrounding Central Park. I was dumbfounded. So when you take our 29-story Monroe Tower and drop it in downtown Manhattan, with thousands of other buildings bigger, we fully realize that size is relative. And finally, this 15th century stonework could be most anywhere in South or Central America. The granite stones were quarried and precisely cut and assembled without mortar by the Incas, carefully fitted together, such that it's difficult even to pass a credit card between the headstones. But of course, this is not almost anywhere, but Machu Picchu, rising about 8,000 feet above sea level in Peru, a vast mountainous settlement covering over 5 square miles. So I hope this has given you a fresh sense of the wonder of things close at hand and how your frame of reference can influence your impression of the qualities of most any place. Thank you.